talk about the importance of ethics and trauma-informed care within psychodrama leadership and psychodrama community. So, ethics become especially important in psychodrama practice and training. The experiential component of clinical psychodrama practice and training creates increased opportunities for ethical dilemmas and issues to emerge compared to talk therapy groups or training events that are didactic or lecture based. Because we're interactive, we're engaged, it's all experiential. We're bringing ourselves and our own issues at times into the training and education process. Trauma informed principles are implicitly embodied in much of psychodrama's theories and philosophies and methods, and Moranian philosophy. But there's been very few explicit attempts to integrate SAMHSA's 6 trauma-informed principles into psychodrama practice and psychodrama training. And this was a main reason why I decided to write this book, to try to more fully and explicitly, consciously integrate these 6 trauma-informed principles into the psychodrama world. The American Society of Group Psychotherapy and Psychodrama and the American Board of Examiners in Psychodrama don't have their own specific code of ethics, but instead subscribe to APA, the American Psychological Association's Code of Ethics. This is in contrast to a 1995 study that was published in the Psychodrama Journal, where they discovered that 94% of participants, who were all ABE certified psychodramatists, 94% of them were in favor of a formal code of ethics that were specific to psychodrama, mandatory instructions on ethics in psychodrama training, and a new section on ethical standards and ethical issues in the psychodrama written examination. Now, the third is included in the written exam. There is a section related to ethics. However, there is not a formal code of ethics for psychodramatists that's unique to psychodrama or mandatory trainings on ethics in psychodrama training. The same study found that over half of the participants indicated a belief that the existing professional codes of ethics were insufficient for the unique complexities involved in psychodrama practice. That APA and ACA and NASW codes of ethics are great for their respective professions, but they don't adequately address the unique complexities of psychodrama practice. Kellerman, in a 1999 article, says that the psychodramatic action format, involving more emotional expression, more physical intimacy, and more technical experimentation than other verbal approaches to psychotherapy, increases the need for safeguarding both the participants and the practitioners. And Kellerman goes on to propose 7 principles for consideration for a new psychodrama code of ethics. These 7 principles are a commitment to responsibility, to competence, to welfare and well-being, ethics related to promotion and advertising, confidentiality, therapeutic relationships, and professional values. Now, while there's not a specific psychodrama code of ethics in the United States, I did discover that various international psychodrama associations have published their own psychodrama codes of ethics, including the Federation of European Psychodrama Training Organizations, or FEPTO. The British Psychodrama Association, BPA, has their own code of ethics, and the Australian Psychodrama Association has their own code of ethics as well. It's interesting to note that Moreno did actually publish a code of ethics for group therapists and for psychodramatists in the 1960s. However, his code of ethics publication does not outline specific principles like a traditional code of ethics. Instead, it focuses on the suggestion that the Hippocratic Oath should be extended to all group members, and that we should treat everybody in the group as a therapeutic agent, that we should do no harm to group members and ask group members to do no harm to each other, that we should commit to confidentiality and ask group members to do the same, that we should treat everybody as equals within the group, regardless of their status outside the group, and ask everyone in the group to do the same. and that we should use all of our resources and strengths and experience and knowledge to help everybody in the group, and we should ask the group members to do the same. So I encourage you to consider, what are some of the common ethical concerns that have emerged in your own psychodrama practice and training? In my own experience, I have found ethics to sometimes be lacking in the psychodrama world. Although the psychodrama community is my favorite professional community to be a part of, I've also been shocked and concerned by the lack of ethics at times. And I would add, I've been shocked and concerned by the lack of ethics in the larger psychotherapy world, social work, psychology, group work, addictions treatment, mental health treatment world. I found in psychodrama specifically, there's often a lack of differentiation between training and between therapy groups, which leads to all sorts of conflicts of interest and dual role problems. I often found that in many cases there were just blatant ethical violations by trainers, by practitioners that take advantage of their power, that neglect their responsibility to the group or to their trainees. Yalom and Leslick, in their 2020 group psychotherapy book, offer some guidance around group therapy training that I think really applies to psychodrama training as well. A quote from their book. They say, "There's a useful distinction to be made between a therapy group and a therapeutic group. A training group, though it's not a therapy group, is therapeutic in that it offers the opportunity to learn about oneself. By no means, though, is each member expected to do extensive therapeutic work. The basic contract of the group, in fact, is training, not therapy. To a great extent, these goals overlap. A leader can offer no better group therapy training than that of an effective therapeutic group." So, because of the experiential and relational aspect of group work and psychodrama training, the training experience is a group experience and it can be very therapeutic. But the overall and primary purpose has to be education and training, not providing therapy to trainees. And I find this often gets confused and blurred in psychodrama training. I've seen countless psychodrama training events and training groups where you wouldn't be able to differentiate them from a therapy group, which is problematic. And it leads to trainees completing their training hours, but being unprepared for the theory and history and philosophy aspects of their psychodrama exams. So I think psychodrama training can really conform to the description I just read from Yalom about training groups. And when it's in academic settings, there has to be additional boundaries in place, in that most academic, university, and professional settings are going to need more rigid boundaries about emotional experiencing, about blurring the lines between a therapy group and an educational offering. And so whenever I do a guest lecture or I'm teaching a class in a university or I'm at a research-based conference or professional setting, I'm intentionally containing my psychodrama demonstrations to be even more contained and professionally oriented than I would in an ongoing training group. And if you wanted to learn more about that, I'd encourage you to check out the best practices document that I helped put together as it relates to teaching psychodrama in academic settings. And it's available for free on the website of ASGPP, the American Society of Group Psychotherapy and Psychodrama. Now, many of these ethical problems can be traced back to the founder of psychodrama, Jacob Moreno, who was not always one to emphasize professionalism. Actually, he often challenged many of the norms of professionalism at the time. And he sometimes engaged in behavior that was ethically questionable at best. However, we need to really centralize ethics in our work if we want psychodrama to be a respected modality and to reach the next generation and to regain the popularity that it lost in the United States. We really need to emphasize the importance of ethics. A trauma-informed modality without a trauma-informed process for training professionals is fundamentally flawed. So this really means that as psychodrama trainers, we really have to, as best as we can, create trauma-informed training institutes if we're going to be teaching people how to do trauma-informed psychodrama. And I want to just name that we're never going to be perfect at this. We're always going to make mistakes, and we always have room to grow. And it's important that we continue getting feedback and guidance and growing as trauma-informed leaders and trainers. So I challenge you to reflect on some of the ways that you can further grow in your own professionalism and in your own ethics. How can you support and challenge your colleagues to further uphold the highest standards of professionalism and codes of ethics? Now, in talking about ethics and the psychodrama community and trauma informed practice, it's also important that we highlight how there's also lots of room to grow when it comes to addressing issues related to diversity, social justice, and inclusion. And that this is inherently a part of trauma informed ethics. It's the sixth trauma informed principle. A lot of progress has been made in this regard in the American psychodrama community in the past 10 years. And there's a lot more work to be done, a lot more progress to be made. There's a real lacking literature base about anti-oppressive psychodrama practices and a lacking literature base and research base about the different uses of psychodrama with different marginalized communities. Trauma-informed care philosophy really guides us as psychodramatists to emphasize social justice and to use our methods to help all of humanity. I mean, this was articulated in Moreno's original vision of society, healing for society. And it's outlined in the first sentence of his famous book, Who Shall Survive, where he says that a truly therapeutic approach can have no less objective than the whole of mankind. So psychodrama used to be quite popular in the 60s, 70s, and it fell from popularity throughout the 80s and 90s into the early 2000s. It seems to be regaining popularity, and there's lots of objective measures that suggest that, including increased number of applicants for certification, increased publications on psychodrama, increased special editions in other journals on psychodrama, increased books on psychodrama, and new interest in it. And as psychodrama starts to become more popular and visible and prominent again, I think trauma-informed care offers us as a community many of the things that we're missing that may have led to psychodrama's downfall. One is standards for ethics and for professionalism, a connection to research and evaluation and assessment and an evidence-based, which is really important in trauma-informed care, but is sometimes lacking in psychodrama. Emphasis on safety for trauma survivors and providing trauma-focused services. Psychodrama was created in the 1920s and 30s, long before we had language to talk about and understand trauma. 50, 60 years before PTSD was even recognized as a diagnosis. And so the trauma-informed care philosophy really can help us modernize psychodrama theories and practice. It also gives us a framework for emphasizing social justice and identity in our work, and a framework for creating trauma-informed training and educational experiences. I think Kellerman's guidance from over 2 decades ago still rings true. In his 1999 publication, he says that the future of psychodrama rests on the careful selection and training of ethically minded practitioners. So I want to re-emphasize a call to action that I published in the Psychodrama newsletter some 5 years ago, calling on us as a psychodrama community to reprioritize our emphasis on ethics and professionalism. In conclusion, trauma-informed leadership is about action rather than just knowledge. Trauma-informed leaders recognize the role of emotions and communication in their work. A trauma-informed leader attempts as best as possible to communicate with calmness in an emotionally regulated manner. And in doing so, we'll be able to help emotionally regulate the anxieties and arousals of others. Whereas an anxious and angry leader is only going to fuel more anxiety, anger, and depression. Trauma-informed leadership is about having more than just knowledge. It has to be integrated and operationalized in the work. The centralization of ethics in our field will help promote the reputations and the effectiveness of the methods that we're using and the organizations we're working in. So, in conclusion, I want to read to you the last paragraph of the last chapter of the book here. In this last chapter, this conclusion I wrote, it says that reading or writing a book on trauma-informed care is insufficient alone. We must take what we have learned and put it into action in our groups and in our organizations. This will require an ongoing commitment to growth, self-reflection, and learning. This will require us to cultivate our own systems of peer support, to address our own traumatic wounds, and to care for our own vicarious traumatization. It will require community, courage, and commitment. Together, we can infuse our organizations and our professions with trauma-informed principles and collectively enhance the quality of services and education for the next generation of clients, students, trainees, and workers. And the last questions at the end of the book that I'll leave to you at the end of this video are, how will you integrate your learning from this book, from these videos, into your work? Who can support you in your development as a trauma-informed practitioner and in your development as a trauma-informed leader? And what are the next steps that you can take to be the best leader that you can be? So I hope you find this book and these videos useful. If you did, I encourage you to leave a comment on the video here. Tell us what was helpful about the videos. Tell us what stood out to you. Check out the book. You can purchase it online at any major book retailer or on Amazon. And one of the most helpful things you can do for a book author is to leave an honest, short review on Amazon about the book. Those Amazon reviews really go a long way in helping the book become more visible for future readers. If you'd like to be notified about future videos released on this channel, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button and encourage you to let us know how these videos can be better. Let us know what's been helpful and how we can be more helpful going forward in future videos.